For this one, I feel like we should talk about a set of prophecies. And up until this point, kind of avoided um, some prophetic stuff. And don't really know why, but um, just haven't felt led that way. But there's a lot of really interesting prophetic stuff that ends up coming true. Um, we have um, like 400 or more prophecies about Jesus' life in the Old Testament that all come true. And if just 8 of them are to come true, the statistical odds of that are incredible. I believe it's something like, I've heard this stat before, although I'm terrible at math, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but something like stacking silver dollars knee deep all over the entire state of Texas and painting one of them red and randomly reaching in the pile and pulling that red one out would be similar odds. And that's just for 8 of them. But for 400, I don't even know how you begin to calculate um, the odds of that. But that's not what we're focusing on today. There's a lot that end up coming true about world events too, empires rising and falling out of the book of Daniel. But for some reason, we have felt led to mention, it's going to be maybe a little controversial, but some specific stuff about Israel. If you will look at Deuteronomy chapter 30, if you'll turn there, if you have a Bible, Deuteronomy chapter 30. And this is a promise to the entire nation of Israel. All these blessings and curses I've spoken about will happen to you. Take them to heart when you are among all the nations, where Yahweh your Elohim will scatter you. If you and your children return to Yahweh your Elohim and obey him with all your heart and with all your soul, doing everything I command you today, he will restore your fortunes, he will have mercy on you, and gather you from all the nations of the world, where Yahweh your Elohim will scatter you. Even if you are scattered to the most distant country in the world, Yahweh your Elohim will gather you and bring you back from there. Yahweh your Elohim will bring you to the land your ancestors owned, and you will take possession of it, and Yahweh will make you more prosperous and numerous than your ancestors were. That's from a Names of God version. So if we look at that promise, let's see, Deuteronomy was written in probably, it's going to be pretty old BC. Let's see. Probably 8th century BC. So that's a promise he makes to Israel, that he is going to scatter them and that he will bring them back. That they will, towards the end of that, starting at chapter 19, choose life so that you and your descendants will live. Love Yahweh your Elohim, obey him, and be loyal to him. This will be your way of life, and it will mean a long life for you in the land that Yahweh swore to give your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And since Elohim is incapable of lying, and they promised Abraham and Isaac and Jacob that he has to bring it to pass but at the same time, he can't overlook how often Israel has failed to keep even his simplest commandments. So he does scatter them, as we see in world history, among all of the earth. If we will flip to Psalm 102. O Yahweh, hear my prayer, and let my cry for help come to you. Do not hide your face from me when I am in trouble. Turn your ear toward me. Answer me quickly when I call. My days disappear like smoke. My bones burn like hot coals. My heart is beaten down and withered like grass because I have forgotten about eating. I'm nothing but skin and bones because of my loud groans. I'm like a desert owl, like an owl living in the ruins. I lie awake. I'm like a lonely bird on a rooftop. All day long my enemies insult me. Those who ridicule me use my name as a curse. I eat ashes like bread, and my tears are mixed with my drink, because of your hostility and anger, because you have picked me up and thrown me away. My days are like a shadow that is getting longer, and I'll wither away like grass. But you, O Yahweh, remain forever. You are remembered throughout every generation. You will rise and have compassion on Zion, because it is time to grant a favor to it. Indeed, the appointed time has come. Your servants value Zion's stones, and they pity its rubble. The nations will fear Yahweh's name. All the kings of the earth will feel your glory. When Yahweh builds Zion, he will appear in his glory. He will turn his attention to the prayers of those who have been abandoned, and he will not despise those prayers. This will be written down for a future generation, so that people yet to be created may praise Yah. Yahweh looked down from his holy place high above. From heaven he looked at the earth. He heard the groans of the prisoners and set free those who were condemned to death. Yahweh's name is announced in Zion, and his praise in Jerusalem, when nations and kingdoms gather to worship Yahweh. He has weakened my strength along the way. He has reduced the number of my days. I said, My El, don't take me now in the middle of my life. Your years continue on throughout every generation. Long ago you laid the foundation of the earth. Even the heavens are the works of your hands. They will come to an end, but you will still go on. They all wear out like clothing. You will change them like clothes, and they will be thrown away. But you remain the same, and your life will never end. The children of your servants will go on living here. The descendants will be secure in your presence. I alluded to that in a prior video. I'm going to, before I discuss that, kind of cross-reference these two with Ezekiel 37. The power of Yahweh came over me, and Yahweh brought me out by his Ra'uk and put me down in the middle of a valley. The valley was filled with bones, and he led me all around them. I saw that there were very many bones at the bottom of the valley, and they were very dry. Now, I'm going to stop here for a moment. There are 42 verses in it, or chapters in Ezekiel, and they trace Israel as a nation prophetically, and this is kind of late that this is happening. This is late in the book, but it follows Israel as time goes on. I encourage you to go read it. But anyway, at the bottom of the valley, and they were very dry. Then he asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I answered, Only you know, Adonai Yahweh. Then he said to me, Prophesy to these bones. Tell them, Dry bones, listen to the word of Yahweh. This is what Adonai Yahweh says to these bones. I will cause breath to enter you, and you will live. I will put ligaments on you, place muscles on you, and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will live. Then you will know that I am Yahweh. So I prophesied as I was commanded. While I was prophesying, suddenly there was a rattling noise, and the bones came together, one bone attaching itself to another. As I looked, I saw that ligaments were on them, muscles were on them, and skin covered them, yet there was no breath in them. Then Yahweh said to me, Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of Man. Tell the breath, this is what Adonai Yahweh says. Come from the four winds, breathe and breathe on these people who were killed, so that they will live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath entered them. Then they came to life and stood on their feet. There were enough of them to form a very large army. Yahweh also said to me, Son of man, all the people of Israel are like these bones. The people say, Our bones are dry, and our hope is vanished. We are completely destroyed. Similar to in Psalm 102, my days disappear like smoke. My bones burn like hot coals. I'm nothing but skin and bones because of my loud groans. Skip on down to my days are like a shadow, and that is getting longer, and I'll wither away like grass. So, very, very similar language. Anyway, Yahweh said to me, Son of man, all the people of Israel are like these bones. The people say, Our bones are dry, and our hope has vanished. We are completely destroyed. So prophesy. Tell them this is what Adonai Yahweh says. My people, I will open your graves and take you out of them. I will bring you to Israel. Then, my people, you will know that I am Yahweh, because I will open your graves and bring you out of your graves. I will put my Ra'uk in you, that's spirit in Hebrew. I will put my Ra'uk in you, and you will live. I will place you in your own land. Then you will know that I, Yahweh, have spoken, and I have done it, declares Yahweh. I'm going to skip down to verse 21. Then tell them this is what Adonai Yahweh says. I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they've gone. I will gather them from everywhere and bring them to their own land. I will form them into one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel. One king will rule all of them. They will no longer be two nations or be divided into two kingdoms, referencing like Israel and Judah in the Old Testament. That's no longer going to be the case. There will be one Israel. They will no longer dishonor themselves with their idols, with their detestable things, or with their rebellious acts. I will forgive them for all the times they turned away from me and sinned. I will cleanse them so that they will be my people, and I will be their Elohim. My servant David will be their king, and all of them will have one shepherd. They will live by my rules, and they will obey my laws. They will live in the land that I gave my servant Jacob, the land where their ancestors lived. Now this is an allusion, that's David, meaning a descendant, because at the time that this book is written, David has already been deceased several centuries. So I don't think Ezekiel himself believed he meant literally King David, but a descendant that will be fulfilled eventually in the millennial kingdom of Jesus Christ after the Battle of Armageddon. But anyway, they, their children, and their grandchildren will live in it permanently. My servant David will always be their prince. I will promise them peace. This promise will last forever. Now, this part hasn't been fulfilled yet. Some of the other things we've been talking about has been fulfilled, but that will only be fulfilled in the millennial kingdom of Christ, because there's still significant tribulation left. The time of Jacob's trouble, there's war and all kinds of things left. So this promise of everlasting peace obviously has not yet been fulfilled, but it will be fulfilled one day, just as the earlier parts of this chapter were fulfilled. I will establish them, make them increase in number, and put my holy place among them permanently. My dwelling place will be with them, I will be their Elohim, and they will be my people. Then the nations will know that I, Yahweh, have set Israel apart as holy, because my holy place will be among them permanently. If we go back to chapter 36, chapter 36, mountains of Israel, listen to the word of Yahweh. This is what Adonai Yahweh says. Your enemies said this about you. Aha, the ancient worship shots now belong to us. So prophesy, say, this is what Adonai Yahweh says. Your enemies turned you into ruins and crushed you from every side. You became the possession of the rest of the nations, and people began to talk and gossip about you. We'll skip down to verse 8. I will note there, if that doesn't describe a nation as any other nation could that describe, as clearly as it does Israel. Israel has been so mistreated by every nation, and often treated as just a possession, and they have been crushed from every side. People have talked and gossiped about them. Of course, there have been genocides throughout history, but the systemic execution of such a vast number of people in such a short amount of time in the Holocaust, it's unimaginable the type of killing, the systematic use of the machinery of governments to just murder people. I mean, sites that we don't even hear about much. Just imagining their numbers. I mean, we talk about Auschwitz a lot because it was such a large prison camp too, and lots of people escaped Auschwitz because it was a prison camp, to tell us about it. But sites we don't even talk that much about. Sites like Sobibor and Treblinka. I believe, if I recall from my undergraduate studies correctly, I studied a lot of war in my undergraduate major. I believe Treblinka is estimated to have killed between 900,000 and a million people. 900,000 and a million people in just a few short months. Treblinka was not operational for that long, maybe a little over a year, but I don't even think that long. In that amount of time, and only 3 people out of that vast number, 3 are known to have escaped to tell about the horrors of Treblinka. Those types of camps were not prison camps like Auschwitz was. It was a pure machine of death. Kill as many people as possible in a short amount of time as possible. But back to verse 8 of chapter 36. But you, mountains of Israel, will grow branches and bear fruit for my people Israel. My people will come home soon. Skipping down to verse 10. I will increase the number of people who live upon you. All the people of Israel, all of them, will live on you. The cities will be inhabited, and the ruins will be rebuilt. I will increase the number of people and animals that live on you. They will grow and become many, and I will let people live on you as in past, and I will make you better off than before. Then you will know that I am Yahweh. I will bring people, my people Israel, to you. They will take possession of you, and you will be their inheritance. You will no longer take their children away from them. Verse 19, I forced them into other nations, and they became scattered among the nations. I judged them based on the way that they lived and based on everything that they had done. But whenever they went among the nations, they dishonored my holy name. People said about them, these are Yahweh's people, yet they had to leave his land. I became concerned about my holy name because my people dishonored it among the nations wherever they went. So tell people of Israel, this is what Adonai Yahweh says. I'm about to do something, people of Israel. I will not do this for your sake, but for the sake of my holy name, which you have dishonored among the nations wherever you have gone. I will reveal the holiness of my great name, which has been dishonored by the nations, the name that you have dishonored among them. Then the nations will know that I am Yahweh, because I will reveal my holiness among you as they watch, declares Adonai Yahweh. I will take you from the nations and gather you from every country. I will bring you back to your own land. I will sprinkle clean water on you and make you clean instead of unclean. Then I will cleanse you from all your idols. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will move your stubborn hearts and give you obedient hearts. I will put my Ruach in you. I will enable you to live by my laws, and you will obey my rules. Then you will live in the land that I gave your ancestors. You will be my people, and I will be your Elohim. Skipping down to verse 35, people will say, this wasteland has become like the Garden of Eden. Israel, since its return in 1948, in a desolate desert place, has just flourished, just done exceedingly well. Incredible to imagine. But as God first promised them back in Deuteronomy, whenever they were scattered, he was going to bring them back. And then in Ezekiel, in chapter 36, he said he grew weary of his name being dishonored, and he wasn't going to do it for their sake, just like he didn't save us that are believers for our sake, not because we deserved it, but to glorify his holy name and show his nature. So he restored them. He brought them back at a time that seemed impossible. When else have you known, and I'm going to say that's rhetorical, in case it's not clear, you haven't known of another time, that a people who were at such a low point have been brought back into a nation and flourish so well that at the height of the Holocaust, with people being slaughtered, people being refugees, roaming the world during this wartime in the early 40s, and then by May of 48, they have become a nation again at such a low point, arguably the lowest point in their history. They have been brought back, and a defensible nation. They've, those wars early on in their history, like the 6-Day War, able to defend at such a weak place, such a weak point in their history, able to defend this land that God has brought them back to, and that was promised in the Old Testament. I believe 102 of the book of Psalms is really a lamentation of someone in the Holocaust, explaining what was going on and crying out to God about how terrible it is. I eat ashes like bread, and my tears are mixed with my drink. My bones burn like hot coals. My days disappear like smoke. Just a terrible, terrible, hard to imagine. And why I believe that is that at verse 18 it says, this will be written down for a future generation, so that a people yet to be created may praise Yah. Yahweh looked down from his holy place high above. From heaven he looked at the earth. He heard the groans of the prisoners and set free those who were condemned to death. I believe chapter 37 of Ezekiel is a vision, an allegorical kind of vision that Ezekiel is allowed to have of this, that he sees this valley of dry bones. Israel, as I've told you, Ezekiel's been tracing their history, and at this point, this is close to the end of the book of Ezekiel. At this point, he sees this valley, Israel, and at one point, Yahweh even says in verse 11, Son of man, all the people of Israel are like these bones. The people say, our bones are dry, and our hope has vanished. We are completely destroyed. He sees just this burnt, desolate, dry valley full of bones of the remnants of the descendants of Abraham. They have been brought to such a low place, and all the onlookers would say to this vision, How could this valley of bones live? But Yahweh breathes life into them. And he sees muscle and ligaments and sinew start to come together, and he raises a vast army out of this dead valley of bones. And it's clear in 21 of that chapter, I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they've gone. I will gather them from everywhere and bring them to their own land. That's a promise that does come true. That was 72 years ago. 72 years ago. That's been quite a while. And the next chapters move into the Gog and Magog war, when Russia and Iran and maybe even China, some major army from the east, comes in and begins a war against Israel. That's the next thing that's prophesied. This, which I believe references the Holocaust and then Israel coming back. The next thing in Ezekiel is moving in to, I believe, the war that either kicks off right before the Great Tribulation starts, or the tribulation period, not necessarily the Great Tribulation if you're someone who distinguishes the 7 from the last 3.5 years. I think this either starts right before the 70th week of Daniel, that 7-year period. It either starts right before or just getting into it. I think that's the next thing that's prophesied in Ezekiel that kicks it off. So we're close to the end of Ezekiel's prophesying for Israel and what all would happen. The next thing after that, the next chapters after 37 and 30, or excuse me, 38 and 39, which talk about the Gog and Magog war, are instructions on how to build another temple. And another temple is built, but it gives dimensions and those types of things on how to build the Holy of Holies and then the holy place, and lays out very in clear detail. This is how the temple's supposed to be set up. So that is close to the end of Ezekiel's prophesying for a time, what all would happen to Israel as a nation. If we move over, similar things were promised here by Daniel and by Jesus in the Gospel of, we'll be looking at Matthew, but I think the other synoptic Gospels have it as well as John and the book of Revelation. But I think this one's more clear if we'll look in Matthew. So when Ezekiel is writing about these things, Israel had not yet been scattered. That happens in the year 70 AD, and Jesus promised that would happen. In chapter 24, verse 2, but he answered them, "You see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." And that happened. Rome advanced on Israel and besieged Jerusalem during some of these riots that were going on in that time. Some of the things that were going on in Jerusalem, they besieged it for several months. And then I believe it was in the Hebrew month of Tishri, I think, which will be around August of our day. Was it Tishri? In our calendar, the Jewish calendar. I can't remember what month. I knew it at one time, but I think it was the year. I'm not 100% positive, but I think it was in the year. It was definitely the year 70 AD. I think it was the Hebrew month Tishri. But anyway, it completely destroys the temple. But Jesus talks about referencing some of the things that are referenced in Daniel and then would later be referenced by John in Revelation. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. That's in verse 9. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another, and many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel, the kingdom, will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations. Then the end will come. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet of Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. So he says the temple will be destroyed in chapter 2. In verse 2, it clearly will be rebuilt because the abomination of desolation talked about in Daniel is that, at least in my understanding in reading Daniel and Revelation, the Antichrist stands up in the temple, in the Holy of Holies, causes the sacrifices which have been resumed on high feast days of Israel, causes them to cease and declares himself to be God himself. But it says when you see that, talking about people living in Israel at the time, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house, and let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. It's clearly talking about really the last day, the Lord's day, the time of Jacob's trouble, the tribulation period, whatever you want to call it. But if we skip down to verse 32, this is interesting to me anyway. We look at a lot of Old Testament writings. Often Israel is referred to as a fig tree, as an illustration in parables, and often the church tends to be discussed as wheat, and those have different harvest times and fall on different feast days. If you follow the Hebrew calendar, which says something about, to me anyway, the different dispensations to the law age, to the church age, to the tribulation age, and even farther than that, older than the law age. You have the rules that applied in the garden. Then Adam and Eve broke those. Then the law age, the church age, the tribulation age, the millennial kingdom, and all of those have different rules that apply to people living in those situations or those different time periods. But from the fig tree, starting at verse 32, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Where is that passage? There's another passage in Matthew where he tells them that his father is about to take up that tree that he had been with and move to plant another tree that might bear the fruits of his master's covenant with him. But here, it's referencing Israel again. That's what it's talking about. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So when you see Israel back in the land, this fig tree is back. That's always been talked about. It's putting out tender branches. It's a young sapling. And it puts out leaves, and you know summer is near. So also when you see that, and the other things he's been referencing, know that he is near at the very gates. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until these things take place. That was 72 years ago that
Israel became a nation again. Then we look at verse 42. Therefore stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. And that's true. I believe it's soon, but we don't know when. Can't really know when, but we know that it will happen. That's all I have.